This month's slideshow is brought to you by Steel Highway. Visit steel-highway.com or follow the link in the description to find out how Steel Highway is supporting the railfan community. Steel Highway, the magazine for the modern railfan. Hello everyone, welcome to the April 2022 Iowa Chapter NRHS and Cedar Rapids Railfans online slideshow. This month, our presenter is Earl Short of Des Moines, and he has a program for us of Des Moines streetcars and trolley cars. Because of the amount of material that Earl had to share, I have elected to divide this into two programs. Today, April 17th, you're going to see the first half of this presentation, and then next Sunday, on April 24th, the second half will air, both at 3 p.m. So please enjoy the program and make sure to tune in next week as well to see the conclusion. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is the April 2022 NRHS Iowa Chapter slideshow. Today we are going to see a program from Earl Short of Des Moines. He is going to show us a slideshow about the streetcar system back in some of the earliest days of the city of Des Moines. So Earl, why don't you take it away? Tell us what you got here.
Thank you, Tom. We'll be showing today the Des Moines streetcar era as it pertained to not only Des Moines but the metropolitan area as well. Pictures of the early days and also right up to the end of the trolley days, which in Des Moines was 1951. And also at the end of it, you'll be seeing a few slides on our project that we have spun off on to build a streetcar monument on a loop that's presently at the entrance of the Waveland Golf Course in Des Moines. And it's been left alone since the streetcars and the buses were there. And so we're going to build a monument on that, and I'll be giving information on that. We've already had the groundbreaking ceremony there in November, and we'll start construction here just any day now. And it'll take about 30 days to do the construction of it, and then we'll have a ribbon cutting ceremony at the end of that. So we'll just go right into this presentation here today, and we'll start off by introducing you to actually how I got started. This is my father there on the right in 1923 when he was a new hire with the company. He was employed with the transit company for 38 years from 1923 to 1961. And this particular picture here, he's the one here on the right. He's the motorman. And then right to his right or to your left is the conductor. And you had two, you had the motorman and the conductor up until 1930 when they eliminated the conductor and turned it into operator instead of a motorman and conductor. And so we'll start off with that. This is a little entrance to how I come to be. And this is my father standing in front of our home in 1942. And that's, of course, me beside him and with my mother there on the porch swing behind us. Trolley days. There was a time when you went anywhere, you took a trolley. For trolleys went everywhere. The practical electric streetcar came into being in 1888 in Richmond, Virginia. It quickly dispatched its predecessors, the horse cars, and ballooned into a transit industry that was operating in excess of 60,000 trolleys over 26,000 miles of street railway by World War I. Clanging, swaying, grinding along, the streetcar created the modern city, rolled two generations of Americans to work, to the suburbs, to the ballpark, out to the laughter and bright lights of the Ferris wheels and roller coasters, and carried up to 11 billion persons a year In Des Moines, that peak year for that was 1946 with 45 million passengers and 695 operators. What is an electric trolley? Well, there's actually three different kinds. You have the streetcar, which ran on rails with an overhead wire, and then you had the trolley buses, which came along right on the heels of the streetcars, and they had two power lines with no rails, and where they could go over to the curb and pick up passengers. And then you had an interurban, which was kind of an overblown, I always call it a streetcar on steroids, basically the same, except it went from city to city, and it was bigger, more powerful, and obviously went faster. Here's the streetcar showing you the overhead line drawing 600 volt through those power lines, and then of course the rail overhead, the rail underneath was the ground. So that was the cycle that you had with the 4 General Electric engine motors powering it. And then the curbliner, or trolley bus, curbliner as it was known here in Des Moines due to a contest. And this particular picture is taken from where this particular bus, which is the only one left in existence, by the way, it's in Illinois Railway Museum. And this picture was taken there at the museum there in Illinois. And then you had the interurban. In the interurban, again, just a bigger streetcar, but you had room for passengers, which is in the back here, and then freight, which is in the front. And the speed on these, they could go 60, 70 miles an hour, probably noted. Some have noted probably faster than that. I remember my father talking about operating the interurban from Des Moines to Colfax, and getting up a pretty good speed. He thought he was going at least 70 miles an hour on the interurban.
Did they have working speedometers in those that they could track their speed, or was it just kind of whatever the operator was comfortable with?
Whatever the operator was comfortable with. Excuse me. Shouldn't have taken that drink of water. And you had just on the power box, and I'll show you that in just a moment how they operated. But the power box and all it did was just register 8 or 9 different speeds that the operator could go. There's how they draw in the power from overhead. 600 volts DC power, and the DC power had to be converted. We had a power station that converted the AC to DC, and then you had substations scattered all throughout the metropolitan area that would bring the DC power out, as DC doesn't go as far as AC. And so the AC was thrown out to these substations and converted to DC power for these particular lines. And here's the streetcar controller that you press down on this handle, and then would rotate that to either 8 or 9 speeds, however you wanted to go. And then also there's a handle here for reverse, so you can back it up as well. There's the inside of the control box, a whole bunch of copper connectors, and sometimes this would backlash, and as they would turn that, you'd have a backlash, an electrical backlash, and it could be very severe, causing an extreme flame quick, and enough to cause people to panic. And I'll show you that in a minute. Well, here's one right here. January 28, 1950. This is a case where that very thing happened. The controller backfired or backlashed and caused a fire to get throughout the streetcar. And it happened so fast that the people panicked. And of course, at that point, the operator could not get these doors open. So the people inside panicked, punched their fists through these windows, which some of them had to be taken to the hospital due to that, before the operator could get the doors open. There's another picture of it, just looking at another angle of that same picture. These are the people. I don't know on this particular picture whether these are all people from inside that streetcar. I think maybe some of them are, and then others obviously came along after they saw the fire. This was taken at 10th and Center in Des Moines. And this is just a breakdown on that particular fire. 6 people were injured, as it said here, with showing the operator's name and everything. But it could happen, and here's this is a slow speed, just a picture that I put in here showing the box, and he's in slow speed right now, and as he turns that handle clockwise, the more he turns it, the faster the streetcar will go. And there's full speed all the way around. Now here's a picture of a Des Moines car, the compartment there, the operator's compartment. This was taken in the 1940s. Operator unknown in this particular picture. I always get a kick out of showing the insulation on these streetcars around the windows, better known as newspapers.
Yes.
They were not the most solid, well-built in the world in the wintertime. They did have base heaters. I remember sitting on those base heaters coming out of the snow with our boots on, and it's snow on our boots, and put your boots up on that heater, running down alongside the compartments, and you can melt that snow off in a hurry. But you got to be careful, because if you left it on there too long, you'd wind up burning the bottom of your soles of your boots too. So it was meant to heat it, and not for people to put their feet on. But we did. And there's a picture of my dad. This is not a streetcar, however. This was taken in 1952 after the buses had come along, and this picture was taken by a Drake student. And it was kind of interesting, because my dad said this Drake student started to get on his bus, and he said, just look straight ahead. And the Drake student took this picture, and my dad thought, well, he'd never hear anything further from that. But the next time that Drake student got on, he handed him this picture. And this is one of the few pictures that I have of my dad in his outfit inside the bus, operating a curb liner.
So just a quick question there.
Sure.
If you go back a photo, the glass jar there that's to the right of your dad, or kind of to his right and to his front, is that the fare change?
That's the fare box, yes.
Fare box, yes, sorry.
Yeah, that's the fare box. And it's kind of interesting, when we would go somewhere as a family, of course, all the operators and their families or their wives got on free, and or their operators got on free, and the wives had a pass. And when it come to me, the operator, if he knew my dad, of course, most of them did, they just take and put their hand over the top of that fare box as I'd walk by. And so basically I'd get on free too. But if not, I'd put my fare in there.
Sure.
And, it was probably, as I started, I remember it being a nickel, and then it wound up being a dime, and then a token. We had the tokens. And that was the early fares. When I was going or riding on them anyhow.
Yeah.
Now this is just a compartment showing This was taken in 1938, and it's not Des Moines. It's just a picture showing the compartment. Most of the time, the operators operated on a stool, and they had, you go back, here they've got a seat, and there he's got a seat. But these were the later cars, the 700 series, and then the buses. Before that, they all had stools, and made operating a streetcar sometimes a little hazardous. If you had to stop the streetcar in a hurry and you're sitting on that stool. And I've got a lot of stories of the streetcar operators falling off those stools and while they're operating the streetcar. One in particular I'll share with you, of my good buddy, streetcar operator for years. When we started this project, he was one of 12 streetcar operators that I had, local streetcar operators. And he was telling me the story about him going out on a Crocker line where the line went 2 blocks one way, a block the other way, and then 2 blocks the other way. And he was counting his fare, or his transfers. And he thought he knew which one of the blocks he was on. Instead of him being on the 1 block, or 2 blocks, he was on the 1 block. And as he went to turn, he wasn't ready to turn yet, obviously. And the streetcar turned, and he fell down out of the compartment, completely out of the streetcar, onto the curb. Of course, you have a dead man switch that when they leave, their foot comes off that dead man switch and the streetcar stops. But he wound up, embarrassingly enough, on the curb, actually on the parking. And it was just especially funny to hear him tell about the story about being knocked off that stool.
Yeah. Now, some of the streetcar photos that I've seen have the operators standing also. Was that more common or less common than what we see here?
Not common here in Des Moines, no. No, very seldom. In fact, I think back, I don't ever remember seeing one stand.
Okay.
You're right, I have seen that. In fact, here's a case right here.
Uh-huh.
Where they're operating. This was not in Des Moines. We did not hire not have to hire any women to operate the streetcars here in Des Moines. I know they did across the country during World War II because there just wasn't enough men to operate the streetcars. But here in Des Moines, we did have enough to operate the streetcars. So we did not have to have the women. Not that that would be bad, women. Please don't get me wrong.
Just not the way things were done.
That's just not the way we did it here in Des Moines. Electrical power for the streetcars of Des Moines. Basically, here's the power station that took the electricity from AC and converted it to DC, 600 volt DC. And then you'd have these stations scattered all throughout the metropolitan area, primarily the Des Moines area, that would take the DC power and extend it on out to the end of the streetcar line. This particular picture, 4th and Maple, looking right from the river. This is a better picture showing it. And this is you had the shops building in this particular picture where they worked on the street, or actually the interurbans and the streetcars. And then the powerhouse here behind with a huge smokestack.
Yeah, that had to have been a pretty massive complex. Probably took up almost the whole city block there.
It took several city blocks. Yes, it did. Yeah, that was a pretty complex. I'll show you another picture of it, an aerial. Well, I guess it's coming up. These are just pictures of the employees at the shops building, and showing the streetcars and as it would go into the shops themselves. And then in behind this is where the power station was. And here's an aerial showing both from downtown Des Moines. You have the Scott Street Dam, bridge here, all the bridges in downtown Des Moines. And then as you go up the river, see the smokestack of the powerhouse, along with the shops building up there. But you had interurbans coming in across from the north, and would come down and circle past the shops building, and it would then they would not come out of that, and they would come on down into Des Moines themselves. But this is the location, and the power was driven by the shops building here right by the river, and the great huge generators were inside this building.
So just to give some orientation for that photo, that's looking north, is that right?
Yes, it is.
So the state capitol building, for instance, would probably be just out of the photo to the right.
You're right. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Because it doesn't look anything like this at all now. To just give people a frame of reference for what they're looking at.
And if you think of the Capitol building, Capitol buildings has Grand Avenue on one side and Walnut yet on the other side as you get further east. And the bridge here, the first bridge is the Grand Avenue Bridge, and then the Locust Bridge, Walnut Bridge, and then Court Avenue Bridge.
Yep.
So that'll give you some perspective as to where the Capitol building was.
Yep, thank you.
And the substations, like I said, in this particular case, I'm showing 10 of them. There are 2 of them that are still up, and actually there's 3, but there's one that is the interurban, which is up north of Des Moines. These were just the ones that right here in the Des Moines area. All substations to further out the DC power out to the streetcars at the end of their lines. This is one of the substations. It was converted to a house out on the south side, and this, of course, this canopy has been built since, but it's kind of interesting. When it was converted to a house in 1975, it was sold to a gal. She's a Japanese American, born and raised in the United States, but her parents were from Japan, and she lived to be 102, and she took care of this place right up to almost the very last. And she was absolutely one of the most amazing ladies I've ever met. She called me when I started this project. She called me and asked me if I wanted to see her house, and I said, "You bet, I'd like to see your house." And they both moved in 1975, and this is when we went out there to take a look at it in I don't remember what year it was. We've got it there somewhere, but anyway, this is where her house is on the map, and coming from McRae Park down past Davis on the private right-of-way, which it did on the south side on this Fort Des Moines line. It was on private right-of-way most of the time, most of the way out there. But I've circled or drawn in the yellow part as to where her house is, right off of Kirkwood. And this is the other one, taken on the northern part. This is off the Clark line. They're both very similar. There's a little bit of square footage difference in between the 2 of them, but basically the same. The walls are very thick. They were very well built. That's the reason why 3 of them are still up. The other one is like I said, that interurban one. I should have included, but I don't have it. This is just showing the location of the Clark Street line going by and where the substation is. Substation is just a half a block off of where the streetcars went by. This is an area where I walked by when I was going to grade school. And well, actually junior high at this point. We went by and we'd go up to 16th, and up on 16th where my grade school, my middle school was, junior high. And we'd walk by this, so I remember this area very distinctly. And then this is a map that I drew showing the streetcar era, going back to 1866 when we first started our horse-drawn era. And we had the horses here for 22 years when the electricity came in 1888. And then we had the streetcars from 1888 all the way up to 1951. Well, in that period, you see in 1938, you see this is where the trolley buses came into play here in Des Moines. So we had a period from 1938 to 1951 where we had both the streetcars and the trolley buses, or curb liners, as I think I mentioned before, that was due to a contest where they come up with the name curb liner. And then they were here until 1964 when all the trolleys were gone. But you'll see the companies that were involved back in those period. 1889 is when Jefferson Scott Polk stepped in and bought all the other companies out. Because there were 7 of them, I hear 7 on one and 10 on another. So we'll go with 7. All 7 companies that had all of a sudden, some of them just take and put their line down in the middle of the night, in the street, and claim that for their own. And that caused a lot of havoc with the city. And so the city, this Jefferson Scott Polk, which was the owner of 2 of the lines himself, he stepped in and bought them all out and called it the Des Moines City Railway. And the Des Moines City Railway was in effect until 1929 when it went bankrupt, and a group from Chicago come in and bought it out, and it was called the Des Moines Railway at that point. This is when basically in my era, when I came along, the 1938 is when I was born, but they were here, the Des Moines Railway was here until 1949, and then it became the Des Moines Transit Company. These are just different streetcars and buses that have been used in the history of the Des Moines era. And it shows the Des Moines City Railway was in effect 40 years, 1890 to 1929. And then Des Moines Railway, and when they were in effect, Des Moines Transit followed them, only 5 years at this point. And Iowa Regional Transit Corporation, they were in effect a little longer, 19 years. And the MTA, they were here for 23 years till 2006. And then in 2006, it became DART, or Des Moines Area Regional Transit Authority, which is what it is today. This is Jefferson Scott Polk. This is the guy that really started it all. He lived from 1831 to 1907. This is him. This is Jefferson in his office in Herndon Hall. This is obviously an old picture. You'll see the gas lantern there on his desk. This is his house that he had built, 2000 Grand Avenue, called Herndon Hall, which was named for his mother's, that was his wife's maiden's name. They call it Herndon Hall. The house is still up today, but it was built in 1883. This is a newer picture of it. This was taken in 2004. 4,061 square feet with 10 fireplaces. It sits on a little over an acre. Owned since 1998 by a Dr. Bergman. 2019 assessed value was $1,210,000 I remember when I was selling real estate early in my career that with Better Homes and Gardens, and Better Homes and Gardens come along and bought this building before Dr. Bergman had it. They put $1 million worth of update in that house. So it not only was an expensive house, but it's had expensive care along the way. And it's no doubt that house is still there today. This is another picture of it, taken in roughly 2004, I think, in this picture. And then this one I took just going up the interstate, the freeway, basically, Martin Luther King Parkway. And as you can see the house, but it's sitting in the middle of a bunch of industrial and commercial area. So you got to be on your toes as you go by just to be able to see it. This gentleman here happens to be great Jefferson Scott Polk's great-great-grandson that I got introduced to, giving a presentation out on that house on Kirkwood. They had an annual ice cream. One of the area neighborhood groups had this ice cream social out there, and they wanted me to give a presentation on the Fort Des Moines line, which I did. But in doing that, I met this gentleman here, which I had not really formally met before. However, our paths had crossed. I worked at the Register and Tribune for 22 years. And while I was there, he was one of the executives there at the Register. Well, the executives and the peons didn't really get to know each other. One was union, one was not. That was a dividing line that you didn't cross. But anyway, he was there when I was there. I met him at this ice cream social, and I handed him my card. And at that point, I did not have the present card I have today. But he looked at that and he says, "That's not Des Moines." Well, the card I had wasn't a picture of Des Moines. And so anyway, he got on my case, which is very common for Luther Hill. He loved to get on your case, and he would get on your case at the drop of a pin.
Yeah.
But I really grew to love this man. He invited me over to his house, and in his house, in his office, was one of the most amazing offices that I think I've ever seen. I wish I'd have had pictures of the inside of his office, but he had all of Jefferson Scott Polk's books, all the family history, all over the entire four walls of this office of his. And he did give me a book that I prize very dearly, that was given to me, well, by Jefferson Scott Polk, basically.
Okay.
Here's the Dr. Turner. This is one of the very beginning in 1886. This is one of the horse cars that Dr. Turner, who was the owner of a line, this was his car, horse car. This is what he was doing business with. And this particular picture, southeast corner, 4th and Center, the location of this picture. There's another Des Moines horse car picture, late 1800s. Here's another one, late 1800s. This is a double horse car, you might say.
2 horsepower. Yes.
2 horsepower. That's correct. And I don't know in this particular case. This was on the Scott Street line, and I am really not understanding why they had to have 2 on that. That was a very. It was a line that was on the level, was not hilly by any means. So I'm not sure I understand why they had to have 2. More eating power. And then here's one in proximity with the Capitol building over on East 12th and Sycamore, which later on wound up being Grand Avenue, looking southwest toward the Capitol here in this particular picture. But there's the same location in around 1940, and no streetcars in this particular picture, however. And there's the location of it as it is 127 years later, where that earlier horse car picture was taken.
Mm-hmm.
And now we shift to Jefferson Scott Polk's, what he called the steam dummy. It was not really overpowered and could only be used basically on a level line. When it come to a steep incline, it was not very good. So they used it on the Grand Avenue and Ingersoll line, which is a line going out to the western suburb toward West Des Moines. And he called his particular car, he called it the Des Moines Rapid Transit Company. He, like I said, he owned two of the companies when he wound up buying all the others out, converting them. Here's just another picture of that steam dummy of Jefferson Polk's, 1888. Another one. This is a converted horse car. In the early days, this owner of this one was Van Ginkel, and you can see all of a sudden how quickly these companies jumped online because they really saw a chance to make money. They saw something in the beginning days that was going to take hold, and it did. Here's another one, Des Moines Electric Railway Company, 1889. Another one, Dr. Turner's car. This was out on the Union Park line, which went out north to Union Park and Highland Park. And then here we get a little newer. It's taking a second Euclid. And now we've got a motorman and conductor. And this took place until 1930 when they eliminated the conductor and went from a motorman and conductor to an operator. But until then, it says PAYE on the front here. Well, it's pay as you enter, and you always entered the rear until 1930 when they eliminated the conductor. And then from that time on, you entered the front, paid your fare at the front with the operator. But here we are in roughly 1910 in this particular picture. This is before they eliminated the conductor. Highland Park, this particular picture, to show the progression of this picture and location. This is the same location, but in 1915. Little newer car, 307, but you still pay it as you enter, which was the rear in this particular case. And you have the motorman up under the controls and the conductor standing outside. However, his location was in the back of the car to collect money as you enter. And this same location, this is what it looked like in 2006 and basically today. But now we move on down a block west at 3rd and Euclid. This was taken in 1916 of the streetcar heading west. And you see the people walking across the street. Some of them look like they're going to get on the streetcar. I don't know whether they did or not. But you see the streets are brick. And this is the heart of Highland Park. And now we're at 9th and Grand, looking north in 1930. And this was, again, uh, the date when things changed. You see a sign on this streetcar that says enter front. So now they've eliminated the conductor, and now you have an operator that takes the fare and operates the streetcar all together. The location, 9th and Grand, you see the churches there behind. Street there, a block up, St. Paul's Episcopal, built in 1885. And then the next block on up, Central Christian, built in 1889. I remember very well standing on this corner waiting for our streetcar. We lived right off the Urbandale line, so we would get on the streetcar here or basically anywhere downtown. But this is where the streetcar Urbandale line would come up to 9th and then turn and go north toward the Urbandale line.
Yeah, it looks like there's a set of tracks that was in there perpendicular also.
Yes, that would be the others that would go on out to the barn. Also, the others that would have gone out there would have been the Clark line, would have gone out a little further and then gone north. So, yeah, you had a lot. This particular intersection, there was a lot of streetcar traffic in this particular intersection.
Sure.
You had another old timer streetcar coming in behind. It says line 15, which was line 15 was over on the east side. And this is the same location, same view in the 1890s, looking north up from 9th and Grand. And you'll see the different churches that were there. Again, First Methodist off here, built in 1881 off to the left. Central Christian 1889, and again St. Paul's Episcopal in 1885, which was up on just a block north on High Street. This has just a one single track going up north here in this picture. There's the same view in 2006. There's quite a
difference.
What a difference. I remember standing out in this intersection and there was nothing like what you see here now. The only thing that's the same is St. Paul's Episcopal's up on High Street there, a block up, and they have since taken out the spire off the top of that. They've had two different spires on there, and they both rusted out or rotted out. And so they've gone for years and years with no spire on top of that building. Here's the older St. Paul's Episcopal with the spire, built in 1854. This particular picture shows 1908. So when this particular picture would have been taken. Another picture, but we're looking northeast in this of that St. Paul's Episcopal with the spire, again 1908. And I want to point the difference out here. I say the reason I am because there's a big item that just had taken place that would be very subtle and you wouldn't pick it up. This particular picture, you see that there is a bunch of stairs down here off of 9th Street. And you go back a picture, and now there's no stairs. Same angle, same everything. But what's transpired is that they've gone in there and dug out 9th Street, because coming into downtown Des Moines from 9th Street on down, clear down to 2nd Avenue by the river, the entrance into downtown Des Moines was very steep. And so all along at different times down there in the early days, they dug these streets down. And this particular case, you were on 9th Street, showing the difference as to what that looked like. And I'll show you another picture coming right up of when they did that, but which was 1911. There's what it appears today, basically, what the church looks like today. Here's the inside of that church. There's another view. We're looking the other direction, southeast, looking downtown Des Moines there. But I want to go up and I want to show you what they had to do to get this street down to where it would be, where they could build and get the traffic down there, the streetcars and whatever down there. Okay, as we go up further north on 9th Street, this is 1911, and see the streetcar coming through. And what had happened here was they were in the process of setting those the buildings back because of what they were going to lower the streets. And so they're in the process of setting these buildings back when one of them collapsed. And very interesting, the tie-in that I had off this and was not aware of it. First of all, the streetcar coming through this pile of rubble, but this pile of rubble just happened to be one of my old good buddies' parents' house. I worked with at the Register and Tribune, and he's the one that taught me how to play handball. And I did not know this at the time. Marco was his name. Marco was, they've still got a store here in town. But this was their house. And it completely obliterated this house as they tried to move it. And there's a little closer up of that same.
Yeah, they really destroyed it.
It sure did. Yeah. There's what it looked like prior to. They were in the process. Here you can see them channeling out 9th Street. And of course they're putting in the whatever you want to call it, tiling down underneath that. But they've already channeled the road, and you can see it with the sidewalk on both sides. You can see how much they lowered that down just to bring this in on 9th Street. And so one of these houses off to the left here was where my good buddy's house was when they tried to move it back. Here's what it looks like today, 100 years later. Just no resemblance of anything.
No.
As you look down through there.
This month's slideshow is brought to you by Steel Highway. Visit steel-highway.com or follow the link in the description to find out how Steel Highway is supporting the rail fan community. Steel Highway, the magazine for the modern rail fan.